Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 13 team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive series. It's the Green Bay Packers. Make sure to hit the like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any of the videos in this series that I'm about to post, that I've already posted. You'll see the playlist eventually. I'm sure you're going to suggest a video. Hopefully YouTube overlords aren't screwing me on that one. But one team that will not be screwed is the Green Bay Packers. I got an itchy head. Man, what a team that couldn't have looked worse in the first half of last season and now looked great, even winning a playoff game against those pesky Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. Just completely destroyed them, and it was really because of just, this team really grew together. It was one of those beautiful examples of what can happen in the NFL when you just give things a little bit of time, when you commit to a certain scheme and a certain game plan week to week, and commit to your players, commit to certain young players that you saw potential in, and who had more potential than Jordan Love, who looked amazing at the end of last year. And I think you'll be surprised, maybe, by my ranking of him going into this year and where I think he can finish. I actually put down some money on him winning the MVP of the season. That's how highly I think of him. Matt LaFleur did a great job as a head coach. Without Aaron Rodgers, there was really no... there wasn't a lot of push and pull. I think that was pretty obvious, and I think that he reestablished himself as a great head coach in the NFL and showed everyone, hey, remember, this is why I got hired to begin with. Remember that, and I think that he's going to continue to grow. Him and Jordan Love look like they're going to be a really great combination. And great combinations on the field is that very young wide receiver and tight ends room where they were all like second, third year players in the NFL. Christian Watson going into his third year. He's the veteran in the room there with Jayden Reed as second year. Musgrave and Tucker Kraft are going into their second years as well. They brought in Josh Jacobs, probably the biggest free agency pickup at the running back position, to upgrade that running back room. It was a very interesting decision to bring back A.J. Dillon. And then they drafted Marshawn Lloyd. So how they work out what's going on behind Josh Jacobs is going to be, cinema in and of itself. With Aaron Jones out the door, I think they definitely wanted to go to more of a between the tackles rushing attack to match up with an offensive line that I think really surprised people. They really outplayed, I think, a lot of projections. Rasheed Walker was really great. You saw a bounce back year from Elgton Jenkins, at least in pass blocking. Zach Tom really came along and established himself as one of the great run blocking tackles in the league, and honestly very, very serviceable at pass blocking. Not saying anything away from that, but his run blocking was amazing. That's going to be a very good combination with Josh Jacobs. They did lose John Runyon to my New York Giants, but they drafted Jordan Morgan from the University of Arizona, who is a tackle. So he's going to be a big guard, it looks like right now. He seems to be winning that job at the right guard position. And with how great Rasheed Walker is at left tackle, I don't know that he's ever going to end up playing left tackle. So we'll see how he works out at guard. He did lose some points for me in his grading by moving to guard, especially at his size. I did like him at tackle a lot more, obviously, than I like him at guard, changing over to guard. But I think that it still makes the offensive line really great. He's going to be the worst offensive lineman on the field going into next season. That's a great place to be, considering he was a first-round pick in the draft. They committed a lot of picks to the defensive side of the ball. You see with Jonathan Bullard, Tyron Hopper, what the hell was that? Edgerrin Cooper, who I think is going to be the all-purpose three-down linebacker for them right out the gate. I do like that they have continued to develop underneath veterans like Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith. They got Lucas Van Ness, who's going to be coming up. Kingsley and Agbar is coming up. They got a really good, interesting little group there with depth at their edge position. Jair Alexander, one of the best corners in the league. And the heartbreaking one for me was Xavier McKinney leaving my New York Giants and coming over to Green Bay to play safety, one of the best safeties in the NFL last year. Can't be understated. But we got to start where we always start, and we're going to start with the coaching staff. And it's LaFleur's staff, one of the better ones in football. So as one of the best head coaches in the entire league, he gets number 7 for me. It's tight though, man. There are some guys that are really the easiest ones for me to rank were really the top 3 to 4. But then once I got sort of past that, there's like this real clump of guys who I mean, but Matt LaFleur, if Jordan Love continues his ascent and this offense is really efficient and the team plays really disciplined, he could easily be into my top 5 at this time next season. He made some really responsible decisions. One was getting rid of Joe Barry, despite how that defense played in the second half of the year. The ceiling was just so low with Barry running that defense. He brought in Jeff Hafley, so there's going to be some fundamental changes going on from the defense. More specifically, for the first time in like over a decade, since like before Dom Capers was the defensive coordinator, they're going to be out of that like 3-4 base formation with the edge rushers, in a 2-point stance type of a deal. Now they're going to be running more of like this wide 9 traditional 4-3 style front 4, which I think is going to play really strong into the hands specifically of Rashawn Gary, Kingsley Enagbare, and Lucas Van Ness. Doesn't really play too well into the hand of Preston Smith, but I think that he's somebody who right now is like a short-term Band-Aid anyway. So I expect Jeff Hafley's new style of defense to really enhance what Green Bay already has. That's really quite good. I think it's also going to help with the interior defensive line play. I think it'll also then in turn help out with their secondary and everything else. Their linebacking group is going to be one to watch. If they end up in some more of like this 4-2 style defense, I think that's still up in the air as to what that general base formation is going to look like for them. Because the linebacker group, as we'll get to, is one that is, they keep introducing some new bodies into it. And how Hafley decides to sort of form that group is going to be a difference maker for this defense, I think, overall. And he just doesn't have the track record for me to rank him like in the top 20, unfortunately. But I think if this defense comes out and they play really well, and you see Rashawn Gary, start to excel in that new, just lining up in a 3-point stance now instead, I think that what you're going to get out of this is a top 20, top 15 defensive coordinator. You got Adam Stanovich, who just based on the nature of having a head coach like Matt LaFleur, who's like the offensive guru of the coaching staff, you put yourself in a situation where he doesn't have as much influence as, say, an offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh or in Arizona, for example, where they have defensive head coaches. But the advantage here is that Stanovich sort of puts himself in a better position to get promoted just by the nature of the league. But again, there's sort of just a body of work that needs to be developed here from him as an offensive coordinator to put him up into that next tier of guys. But this group is going to rise and fall together. I think if this offense sees some regression, then maybe you do start to look at Matt LaFleur a little differently and be like, okay, so what was good about that second half of the year for Jordan Love that hasn't been able to be sustained? I think you start to question him specifically and his strategies and his leadership and his development abilities. But I think this is the best moves that he's made so far as the head coach in forming a staff of offense and defensive coordinators. And I think this is going to be a good meld long term. We're just looking for, them to back up that projection in particular. So still 15th in the league. That's still the upper half of the league, just the bottom of the top half of the league. But there's a lot of potential here. This could end up being a top 10 staff. They have Super Bowl capabilities here with just how well they progressed and that upward trend that we saw. But I do have a lot of faith in Matt LaFleur that he can sustain it. Especially now operating and working well with a quarterback that he's really molded on his own, that he's been 100% really the main influence on since he's come into the league, unlike what he had before in Aaron Rodgers, where there was perhaps a little bit of contentiousness stemming from the Mike McCarthy, Joe Philbin era that he had there. So I think with all that off the table, I think we're going to see a Green Bay Packers team that looks a lot closer to what they had in the second half of the season, winning a playoff game, than what they had in the first half. And that really stems from Matt LaFleur, his brainchild that is this team. And in what might be the most stunning ranking I have, it's Jordan Love, the quarterback. He's my 5th ranked quarterback coming into this year. I said at the top, I bet on him winning the MVP this year. What he showed in that second half of the season, it can't be understated. Once he was comfortable in the offense, once he was comfortable with the guys that he had around him, once he had some help there, once they figured out the offensive line, he excelled in ways that was hard to beat with anyone not named Patrick Mahomes, basically, at the end of last season. That playoff game he had against Dallas, against a great Dallas defense, was just absolutely amazing. It was amazing play, and it really justified to me the contract extension that he had to get. They couldn't let him walk away. They kind of did put themselves in a bit of a hole where he had all the leverage, but I don't think there's anyone in that Green Bay front office that's upset that they signed him to that much money, that they made him, at the time of the signing, the highest paid NFL player ever. Because the projection for him is Super Bowl. The projection for him is to very comfortably fill the shoes of the last 2 quarterbacks that have been leading this franchise since the early 90s, Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. And he's got the potential, the tools to not only get to that level, but potentially exceed it. Not going to give you much in terms of the running game. He's not, Lamar Jackson or anything like that, but he's somebody who you can tell by just the way that his throwing motion has changed over the last couple of years since coming to the league alone. The way that he processes the defense, just the way he did that and got better and better every game throughout the season last year. There was just so much positive and so much development. And it really was sort of this, I talked about in the previous video with Anthony Richardson. It's all about getting the reps sometimes. When you have guys who have this potential, they just have to get on the field. They have to have the reps. They have to be able to make mistakes. They have to be able to go into that film room on Monday and not feel the pressure of the fact that they're on this short leash where if they screw up, it's all over. Jordan Love didn't have that. Jordan Love very much was given the entire season. You're going to have the entire season to make mistakes, get better. All we want to see is an upward trend, and he far exceeded what I believe the Green Bay Packers plan was for him. In terms of his backup, they did draft Michael Pratt, who did have that. He was that quarterback in this draft that had the high-end backup potential in terms of what his projection was, I think, from a lot of people. So for them to land him, I think it's a very good pickup. I think he could be a very serviceable backup for at least the duration of his rookie deal. I think he's going to beat out Sean Clifford. Alex Mago might have already been cut by the time you guys see this. It really is good to be a Packers fan, at least for the quarterbacks. You're not Cleveland. You're like, your quarterbacks is like the head coaching situation in Pittsburgh. It's the one thing that you guys just for some reason never have to worry about. Moving on to the running backs, to this backfield, they brought in Josh Jacobs and they got the number 4 backfield in the entire league here. It's a great upgrade. Aaron Jones, not taking anything away from him. He was definitely trending downwards in many ways. Some people are not as high on A.J. Dillon as I am. I think A.J. Dillon's a really great backup. I thought had they not signed Josh Jacobs at all and just kept A.J. Dillon as a starter, they would have been, in the middle of the pack of the league in terms of their running back room, which I think would have been good enough. But it's clear that they're sort of changing the philosophy of this team up a bit by having Jacobs, Dillon, and Marshawn Lloyd, who they drafted as well, as like these three main backs that they have, they're definitely going to this more like being able to beat you up with the run game, which is something that with Aaron Jones is not something that they were necessarily capable of doing. Now, they do have the tied for 22nd receiving back with Josh Jacobs. I think him and A.J. Dillon will likely split this role as the season goes on to give Jacobs more of that early down work. Just because of the way that the weapons that we'll get to eventually are sort of set up. I don't know if it's necessary that you need Josh Jacobs out there when you've got that plethora of weapons, like the depth that they have. So I think a lot of empty sets could be in the future for Green Bay in certain passing situations. I think Josh Jacobs comes in and he can do what any serviceable back can do in the passing game, which is just, run some basic things, have some sure hands, just make sure you catch it, get in open space, and then use like this combination of power and speed that he has. Many people thought that Josh Jacobs' career would have been over by now, just from the way that they were talking about him when he got picked up by the Raiders and how his Raiders career sort of went. And then it just sort of clicked for him behind a really good offensive line. And I think that in terms of the run blocking, he's definitely downgraded from what he's had the last 2 years. But there's also a lot of potential in the growth for what he's going to have in front of him. I think that the passing game is going to be a lot more respected just because of the quarterback play. So I think that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for him as well. And he also has the talent to make something out of nothing. He's one of those backs where he doesn't go down on first contact. He is very patient and smart with hitting holes. And he can get to that top speed rapidly. And with the size that he's got also carrying behind him, he can become a very dangerous back. A.J. Dillon's almost like a poor man's version of that to some degree. But it's clearly the idea behind this new backfield, basically a 66% change in reality, is that they are going to want to punish their opponents, wear down that front seven, that put those 8 men in the box, and then beat them with the plethora of different types of weapons that they have on the outside and make the play action game a priority, which will, I think, further accelerate the quality of the overall offense. Moving on to the wide receiver room here, and they're tied for 17th, but that's just because they currently are just so young, so there isn't that obvious high-end number one receiver on this roster. So it's not really even talking down to them. And this is one of the few teams where it would have been appropriate probably to list their top 4 wide receivers, because really outside of Jaden Reed, who sort of has that slot receiver role established and taken for his own, there's going to be a rotation next to him, even though Christian Watson is, I think, just a slight level above Romeo Doubs. They also have Dontavian Wicks, who's going to get a lot of playing time. You sort of saw him borderline breakout last year as like that wide receiver 4, filling in for the injuries of Christian Watson and some of the deficiencies that we saw from Romeo Doubs. You can't dismiss Bo Melton as a depth piece as well. But the skill set variety here is really good. And this is sort of what I was talking about when I said different variety of skill sets. Romeo Doubs has more of that, bigger possession catch wide receiver attributes. Jaden Reed's like that slot guy, gadget guy, do it all, quick game. And then Christian Watson is the guy that really stretches the field. I think everyone has certain aspects of their game that they specialize in. So you create through really the 3, and including Dontavian Wicks, the 4 of them, like one super wide receiver. It's just they have all these different aspects of their game that they really need to develop. Christian Watson can be a lot more sure-handed. He can be a better route runner. Romeo Doubs can be a little bit shiftier and a little bit faster. Dontavian Wicks can sort of add clay, to each aspect of his game a little bit. Jaden Reed can maybe be a little bit more, of a true downfield threat. Get some contested catches. Like, even though his size may not dictate that, there's these little things about them where but they're still so young. Like Christian Watson's going into his 3rd year. He's the veteran in the room. Him and Romeo Doubs. Jayden Reed going into his 2nd year. Dontavian Wicks, 2nd year. They have so much youth and they're such a young team. You're going to put these guys in here, and what's really holding them back is the experience. And with the experience will come the consistency, will come the well-rounding of their game. And then you're looking at a situation in a couple of years when these contracts are going to be coming up, because none of these guys are first-round picks. So Watson is playing for an extension along with Dobbs this year. And then in 2 years, you're going to be looking at Reed and Wicks to extend. So you're in a position now where you're working out who's going to be who, what's going to be what, contracts and all that. And you might be able, because the development hasn't been super accelerated, maybe you're able to steal some contracts here, at least in more of the short term, while you let the salary cap go up and you let Jordan Love's contract kick in a bit. You maybe open up some signings for more people on the offense. Like you can manipulate these things here right now and let the slow burn development of these wide receivers quickly turn into the best wide receiver room in the entire league. Certainly one of the deepest, at least, because the floor on this wide receiver room is what they're ranked at, really. They're not going to get worse than this. There really isn't any sign that they'll be worse than this. And that's a really good thing when you got a quarterback like Jordan Love, who, as he continues to develop, he's going to, I think, this year be that quarterback who's going to start making everyone around him better. And then you even move on to the tight ends. Yeah, they're tied for 24th. You got Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. You know, Musgrave gets the slight bump. But this is the floor. They're not going to be worse than this. And that's just not true for a lot of other teams, even teams that are ranked currently ahead of them. So the future of this, you know, Musgrave and Kraft, they can mix in more traditional tight end roles along with more, you know, splitting out receiving tight end responsibilities and just open up the game in so many different ways for Jordan Love and really give you a variety and the ability to be truly creative in your play design and your play calling style and play calling strategies and, you know, drive to drive strategies, quarter to quarter strategies, week to week strategies. It really opens up the game. And it's really difficult for the defense to figure out who's going to be the star they need to go at. Because at any point in time, somebody, at least 2 of these 5 guys are going to break out huge. Which one is it going to be? And you're a defense and you don't want to be the team that has to find out which 2 of these it's going to be. Is it going to be a tight end? You're going to end up with like a Mahomes-Kelsey relationship. Is it going to be one of these wide receivers and you're going to end up with like this, you know, like the old Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs type of connection where it's just 100 catches, 1,500. Like, there's so much to look forward to here. It's just another situation where it's like, just give it a little bit of time and you guys are going to be a dynamic, flying, borderline unstoppable offense that's going to just light the league on fire, truly. And one thing you get in the passing game is you're getting this fantastic offensive line in pass blocking, 4th in the league. You know, Josh Myers, the center, is your worst pass blocker. Okay, perfectly fine. Jordan Morgan picked up a bit of an injury. He seems to have the lead right now on this starting guard spot, with Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom being the really the established tackles right now. There is some concern about Jordan Morgan. I did mention it before. I did lower his grade a little bit as he's moving to guard. It is a bit of a tougher transition, but they're sticking in between a veteran like Josh Myers and a real breakout start right tackle in Zach Tom. So I think that him probably for most of the year being your worst offensive lineman, if he does end up being the starter, which it really does look like that's going to be the case, you know, you're laughing. You're laughing at how good your pass block is going to be for Jordan Love, and he's going to be able to settle in. Elton Jenkins really came back on. Rasheed Walker was a breakout star when it looked hopeless at left tackle with David Bakhtiari out. Even some of the depth pieces here, they either drafted or they picked up a UDFA and Travis Glover. They did some really good work with rookies on the offensive line. They got 5 of them currently. Andre Dillard, I don't know if he makes the team. Luke Tanetta's been there a little bit. Sean Ryan was coming into like OTAs in camp as the front runner for that guard spot, and it seems very quickly got beat out, which I mean is okay, because you drafted Sean Ryan, you drafted Zach Tom, Rasheed Walker, to sort of just throw these assets at the offensive line, hoping one of them would stick, and a couple of them have, and that's really the best you could ask for. I think there's a lot of people that if you said, hey, Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom are entering this draft, knowing what you know about them now, they would have been first-round picks. Donovan Jennings is an interior guy who I think can have some potential too. There's going to be some cap situations. They can't keep everyone forever, sort of like the wide receivers, so they're going to be in a position sort of like with the wide receiver room where they now have options and they can now be a little bit more methodical with their contracts, at least in a pass blocking sense. When you get to the run blocking, they are dropping down to 20th. Zach Tom really is the standalone star in terms of the run blocking. Rasheed Walker, just not that in his game. Elton Jenkins, he's like a serviceable guard. He can't be great at everything. His moving around from playing left tackle and right tackle and left guard and right guard, I think he played center a couple of times over the last couple of years. It has sort of plateaued his development as one of the top guards. He sort of got to that level as being one of the top guards in the league, and then guys started dropping like flies around him. And his versatility, his like high floor versatility, sort of moved him around. I think that sort of quelled his ceiling just a little bit. Still a great player, still great in pass blocking. I do think that this is where that moving around affected him a little bit. Jordan Morgan, again, loses points in run blocking with that move. He's also, moving from tackle to guard and run blocking is much different. He is next to, again, one of the best in the entire league, at least from last year. And Josh Myers, serviceable at that, middle of the pack overall center in the NFL. They don't have a lot of depth for run blocking, but they've also positioned themselves with the type of running back room that they've created to make up for these deficiencies. And it's obvious the focus was on making sure that you have great pass blocking in front of Jordan Love and being a passing team first and executing play action and draw plays and all that to open up opportunities in the run game to make up for some of these deficiencies. But it's sort of like any other group of rookies in particular. You can see there's a significant difference in how they graded out in pass blocking and run blocking. That generally comes when you deal with these day 2, day 3 UDFA offensive linemen. They're good at one thing, not good at both, and generally the ones that are good at both are the ones that go in the first round, early second round. Jordan Morgan, better than all those other guys, good enough to be a starter as a run blocker even with that downgrade. But I think if he was playing tackle, his grade would be, much higher. He'd probably be, I would say, closer to Elton Jenkins if he were to be playing his general position as tackle instead of guard. So that's really the question mark here. Jordan Morgan, if he really excels at guard the way that it was expected of him if he was drafted to be a tackle by a team, then this offensive line quickly enters like top 15 consideration for run blocking and top 2 and maybe jumps up another level in pass blocking, top 2, top 3 rather than 4th. But a very well put together offensive line in general, based upon how they've designed and built their roster. So as you can see in the passing game, they actually look like they got some pretty decent depth to go along with the high-end quarterback play. And again, I look at the tight end and receiver rooms in particular. That's as bad as they're ever going to be. They're not going to get worse than what they are. And that's a real good thing. Getting some decent blocking from the receivers and tight ends as well helps out with the run game. You can get some good split zone plays going on here that's going to open up the game for Josh Jacobs and even A.J. Dillon. There is a concern about picking up the injury from the wrong person. Like if Zach Tom, for some reason, picks up an injury, then you might end up being the worst run blocking offensive line potentially, at least one of, because he is that much of a difference maker. But I don't think that you'd be able to lose a whole lot in pass blocking. I think that would be a situation where maybe Jordan Morgan kicks out to that tackle role as well, and then he's sort of wiping with the opposite hand at the tackle position. But I think it opens up for less of a drop off in pass blocking. So overall, they are tied for 13th in their overall offense, 16th pass offense, 15th rush offense. And again, the pass offense is ranked this way basically because the wide receiver and tight ends just aren't there yet because of the experience. Let them get there. This will be a top 10 pass offense probably by the end of the year. The rush offense, probably this is about where they are, which is a great place to be if you're a top NFL team. You don't necessarily need to be that top 10 rushing offense. You want to be more in the top 10 passing offense in the more modern NFL to get that real great, effective, dangerous offensive play. Moving on to the defense now, we'll start with the edge players, and they're tied for 14th here with Rashawn Gary being a true alpha. Now that he's getting in again to that more 4-3 defensive end style with this new defense, I expect him to really accelerate and really improve even more than he's already established himself as being one of the better edge players in the NFL. This is going to be a much more comfortable position for him to be in. He's going to be able to execute the bull rush a lot more effectively. It's also going to open up the development, like I said earlier, for Kingsley Enagbare and Lucas Van Ness, the younger edge players that they've added to the team over the last couple of years. Lucas Van Ness, first round pick. You expect him in this new defense, especially with the potential that he had coming into the league, that he's really going to be able to accelerate. And I expect to see a lot of him as the season goes on, and for this role to really suit him. Because when he got drafted last year, it was like, okay, is he a 3-4 defensive end, I guess now? But just because of his size, like he sort of was stuck stylistically having to be the backup, like a Rashawn Gary backup type of a deal, where his path to getting on the field wasn't going to be well defined in that defense. Kingsley Enagbare had sort of established himself as well by that point as being like a better backup, like a true high-end backup at that position. And Preston Smith has all the experience and has sort of never dropped off so significantly where he wouldn't have a role as a starter. Like, he is a low-end number 2. Maybe like a middling number 2 at this point in his career, which is a great spot to be in when you do have like a high-end number 1 like Rashawn Gary. Even when you get into edge versus the run, they are also tied for 14th there as well. Enagbare and Lucas Van Ness do take steps back, but how those guys again play in the new defense, they might be able to exceed Preston Smith in many ways, just because now Preston Smith is becoming a 4-3 defensive end in this new system, when that's not really what his game is. Him and Rashawn Gary have basically switched roles and switched deficiencies from year to year now because of that change. And I expect Van Ness in particular, like I said, especially here as an edge rusher in passing situations, to really accelerate. And if he can pick up this early down work as well and really excel there, it's really a competition between him and Kingsley Enagbare as to who's going to be the early down replacement for Preston Smith starting in like week 5, because I do expect Preston Smith's workload to get less and less, at least on early downs, as the season goes on. Then you move to what is complementing them now in the interior, where they were before a 3-4 defense, where you had, traditional nose tackle play and defensive tackle, 3-4 defensive end. Now you're playing with a traditional duo defensive tackle group in this front four. Devontae Wyatt and Kenny Clark, 13th in the league here as interior rushers. I like Carl Brooks as like that rotational third guy in this situation. I think that's going to really work out well for them. And I think this is going to help Devontae Wyatt potentially have his breakout year. He was a project when he got picked out of Georgia. Didn't play a lot in his rookie year. But I think this is the time for Devontae Wyatt. Kenny Clark is like your solid veteran presence. Used to be one of the true best in the league. I would say that he's sort of taken a bit of a step back as he's aged out here a bit. But they've drafted well enough with, again, Carl Brooks in these situations. You can rotate Kenny Clark out in some situations to keep him fresh for certain situations that come about throughout a game. Against the run, they are tied for 24th. Carl Brooks, again, I think him and, TJ Slayton probably will get the nod over Carl Brooks on early downs, even though I do grade Carl Brooks higher, just because I think TJ Slayton does play, again, a much larger role. So you put him and Kenny Clark on those early downs, there ain't a whole lot of places to go up the middle there. And I think you could see some really good play that certainly outplays the talent ranking of tied for 24th for this interior group. But I think, again, it's a healthy rotation that they're going to be able to have. On early downs, they're going to be able to have TJ Slayton, Devontae Wyatt, Kenny Clark, Carl Brooks. You could end up seeing any combination of those four guys on early downs. And I think that especially, the younger guys, Wyatt and Brooks, they're only going to get better. And then I think, you'll see more of just three guys on those passing situations, Brooks, Wyatt, and Clark. But overall, I really like what this front four is going to be able to do. And time will tell what this switch in base defense philosophy is going to do to accelerate some of these skill sets that have sort of been square pegs and round holes in many aspects under Joe Barry's defense. Moving on to the linebacker group, and in linebackers in coverage, they are 21st in the league. They just, by my estimation, outside of the rookie Edgerrin Cooper, they ain't got nothing next to him. And, you can talk about Quay Walker. Quay Walker, I think, is so brutally overrated, and people don't even rate him that highly. Isaiah McDuffie, I guess, is the backup here. I think Cooper and McDuffie are your two best options at linebacker, quite frankly, and then Quay Walker can sort of be a sub if you're looking for a linebacker to blitz at this point. I think he has such a lack of maturity that he just hasn't shown growth in that aspect at all in the couple of years he's been in the league. He just hasn't shown any type of level of consistency unless he's consistently bad in a game. Isaiah McDuffie for a late round pick, he's whatever. I think you can argue Quay Walker gets early down work just because of the lack of depth around this linebacker group. I still think Edgerrin Cooper should be your green dot linebacker. He's your all-purpose linebacker. With the 18th linebacker group against the run, Quay Walker getting in there. Tyron Hopper, he was like a third-round pick, I think. I don't get it at all. He wasn't, he was like a late day 3 pick for me. I think you can tell that by his grades: 45 in coverage and 51 against the run. Those are barely, not even backup depth linebacker numbers for me. So, I guess maybe they're just trying to look at getting younger and trying to throw assets at this linebacker group. Maybe lighting a fire under Quay Walker is going to work. Maybe pushing Edgerrin Cooper into that all-purpose 3-down linebacker green dot role will take maybe some of the pressure off of Quay Walker in, having to be that guy, but also light a fire under him and tell him maybe your job's not that safe even though you are a first-round pick. This is the year where he has to play really well, because at the end of this year, they decide if they pick up his 5th-year option or not. And as of right now, they ain't going to be hesitating to click the no button on that 5th-year option for Quay Walker. So there's a lot that has to change about him and his game and his maturity and his consistency, everything about him has changed. Maybe this change in defense will allow that to happen. Maybe you have Adrian Cooper playing like a traditional Mike linebacker role, like a middle linebacker, 4-3 linebacker role, and then Quay Walker gets to play the Sam linebacker or the Will linebacker, and that drastically improves his play. Time will tell on that, but right now they're sort of like this just below average linebacker room, and that's me being charitable to Adrian Cooper, I think, in terms of my grade for him. But maybe I'm being less charitable than I need to be to McDuffie in coverage and Quay Walker against the run. Maybe I am. Maybe it all evens out at the end of the day. Now to the cornerbacks, and they are tied for 18th, and it's really dragged down by what they got going on around Jair Alexander, who's a high-end number 1 corner. They have Eric Stokes. They got Keyshawn Nixon, who right now I'm looking at being the starters for this cornerback group. It's Eric Stokes playing opposite Jair and Keyshawn Nixon being able to play in the slot. Again, Eric Stokes, former first-round pick. At some point, he's got to come along, right? They took him over his teammate Tyson Campbell, and it hasn't looked like a good choice so far, but you know, they're banking on his speed, and they're banking on him increasing his physicality. It looked like he was heading in that direction, and then, you get some injuries, you get some, slight regression that comes in, and he's sort of settled around like this low-end number 2. So they did go out and get Kalen King, who going into the draft cycle last year looked like he was going to be a first-round pick, and then just his last year at Penn State, it just never got to that level that people were expecting. But I think there is a lot of potential there. It could be something where it just didn't work in his last year in college, and now you're putting him into the pros, and now that's how he gets to that next level. We've seen that example with a couple of guys in a couple different scenarios and a couple different position groups. Particularly, also, you saw it with Kingsley Nagbari, who was sort of in the same role, ended up being a 6th-round pick and has a nice role carved out for him in this defense so far, with the opportunity for some growth as well. I expect Kalen King to sort of be that as a defensive back here. Carrington Valentine, Robert Rochelle, Corey Ballantyne, as a Giants fan, I can't roll my eyes deeper into the back of my head when I see Corey Ballantyne's name. But they're going to find 5 or 6 guys out of this group where they're going to have the opportunity to really grow around Jair Alexander. And you just hope that all these rumblings about issues with Jair Alexander are not founded and not sustained. He went out for a coin toss he wasn't supposed to, got suspended. There's just little things, there's hearing about him potentially being traded. You just hope that you're able to work things out, that, Joe Barry being gone, bringing in a new defensive scheme, getting some new guys in here, that it sort of brings things back to a truly healthy relationship with Jair. Maybe pay him a little bit of money to keep him happy, but he's somebody that you really need to keep, because I don't think they're ever really going to get the return on him that would justify trading him. I don't think they're going to get that Jalen Ramsey return of 2 first-round picks for Jair Alexander. I just don't think that's in the cards for a lot of guys getting traded even at all this year. You saw how Tyreek Hill's value. You saw, you saw Jalen Ramsey's value just recently. There's just a lot that it's just you're better with him than whatever I think you could trade for him. As you get to the safety room, they're coming in with the number 2 safety room in safety coverage in the entire league after having one of the worst ones last year. And it starts with their new additions. It's Xavier McKinney from the New York Giants. I'm trying not to cry. And then drafting Javon Bullard from Georgia. They've really added a lot of these Georgia players to their defense over the years. But these two as a combination in pass coverage is going to be incredible. Javon Bullard's going to play a deeper role. You're going to see Xavier McKinney sort of all over the place. But you really have done a great job of reestablishing the safety room after a couple of years of some really poor play. Then you got Katana Oladapo, who they drafted as well, Evan Williams, who they drafted as well. you're going to have a really young group, a completely revamped one, but there's a lot of high-end potential here, and you're going to get a lot of young players playing, particularly then when you move to DB run support. They're tied for 12th. Katana Oladapo, this is where he's going to get a chance to really shine. He's going to be able to come in, play like a strong safety role, play in as an 8th man in the box, play in the slot, and really come up and start punishing guys in the run game, playing a physical game. And he did really well in college in that role, in those situations, and Xavier McKinney, he's going to be on the field the whole time. 100% of the snaps for the Giants last year. If he's healthy, he'll play 100% of the snaps for the Packers this year. You hope that Javon Bullard can develop in DB run support in the run game. So then that way you really do have a great two-headed monster here, because Javon Bullard's ability in the passing game can't be understated, especially when you're in a division that wants to throw the ball. The Detroit Lions, you got Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison as receivers, with TJ Hawkinson as a tight end on Minnesota. You got Caleb Williams going to Chicago with DJ Moore, with Roma Dunze, with Keenan Allen, with Cole Kmet. Your opposition in the division has focused so hard on developing a more effective passing offense that they had to make these moves, and this was the right thing to do. This was the best offseason, in my estimation, overall, outside of drafting Jordan Love, apparently, that this Green Bay front office has had in a long time. They did all the right moves, and it really is focused in here on this safety room, which is going to help out the cornerback room that clearly is still in need of time to develop in a lot of ways. Eric Stokes' development, like I said earlier, sort of got quelled a bit. Keyshawn Nixon is slowly coming into his own after breaking out as this great special teams player. Kalen King might need just a little bit of time, and then all of a sudden you might get that first round projected talent out of him. They did a great job of setting themselves up for success on the back end, where giving up big plays just doesn't seem to be all that in their future all that often this season. So again, just a quick positional summary here. You look at the cornerbacks against the run. The guys that are going to start, I don't recommend them. Eric Stokes has shown a little bit. Jair Alexander is sort of just like this middle of the pack guy. You want to see them get more physical and really help out this run game. That's really where the deficiencies are in this defense. I think as a passing defense, you got a great front four. You got a great safety group. You're just a couple guys developing away from being like an elite pass defense. And I think that's evident by me ranking them as the 8th best pass defense in football. Tied for 30th in run defense, though that really drags down their overall grade to 19th. Again, you're just looking in the run game in particular. You're looking for some linebacker development. You're looking for some interior defensive line, acceleration in their play. And, you're hoping that you can get, maybe the edge rushers in a more traditional 4-3 role can be more comfortable in setting the edge there and playing harder against the run and more effectively against the run. That can then raise up that grade a little bit. But overall, they are my 13th ranked team, 15th ranked coaching staff, which could by the end of the year be top 10. Tied for 13th total offense, which once those receivers, like I said, once those receivers figure it out, this is a top 10 easily offense. And then the defense sitting there at 19th, in need of some help in the run game that will, inevitably bump them up. And there you have it, my number 13 team, the Green Bay Packers, in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive series. You made it this far again. Look at you, committed to me. Leave a thumbs up. Show me how committed to me you really are. And subscribe and leave a comment in the comment section below. Isn't it great to be here? Football season is almost upon us. We're almost at the top 10. What team are you most surprised hasn't been revealed? What are your thoughts on the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love? Am I too high on him? Let me know. And you can watch the next video in the series or the last video in the series, depending on when you're watching this and if I've posted number 12 yet. And then there's the playlist, and then there's a subscribe button with my fancy little logo that I made for free.